Hello. How do I link this? What the fuck? Why was I even banned? What do you? This is something you don't plan for? What the fuck? I mean, it's awful and all, but like that shit happens every year. Like, not gonna lie, dude.
Hey everyone, Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd. And has anyone noticed there's so much mid out there right now? Just this constant onslaught of albums that are so deeply devoid of anything substantive and attention grabbing that they're barely even worth commenting on. In order to make this point that I want to bring up here in this video, I should probably talk about an old segment that I used to do on my main channel called the Why You Know Review, which was kind of like this gauntlet style album commentary piece of content that I did, where I just like addressed a bunch of records every month or so that I didn't have a chance to review, but I gave some, light thoughts, general thoughts. After a while, I sort of lost passion for doing the segment. Over time, I felt like I wasn't really able to listen to a lot of these albums deeply enough to really get a sense of why it was I didn't really like them. On top of it, at least for me personally, it felt like a lot of my criticisms were kind of growing samey on a lot of these records. The fact is, at the end of the day, even though it is my job to come on here and have opinions of certain songs and projects and artists' works, like, not every album that is out there is going to elicit a strong and in-depth reaction from me. And in addition to all of that, the other thing that was making this segment difficult to continue pulling off was just the sheer amount of albums that were being dropped every month, many of which I may have done a full-length review of were we in a time period where less music overall was being dropped week to week. We're currently at a point where more music is coming out in a single day than in an entire year in the 80s. Now, this intense amount of music content saturation is something that has been long predicted by the music industry and the streaming industry, and has mostly been painted as like a good thing. In fact, if you dig back into any search engine, you can find any number of articles talking about how this music industry consumption long tail is going to be great for DIY and independent musicians, because in theory what is going to be created is like a series of niche fandoms and communities for artists who, aren't necessarily like mainstream level, and they'll be able to build their own independent careers on their own creative tracks without having to worry about generating the sort of mainstream hits that scale for the Billboard Top 40. And while there are certainly examples out there of mid-tier pop artists and relatively underground artists or independent artists, building that kind of community for themselves. Simultaneously, what has also been generated in addition to that is like a bunch of algorithmically crafted musical echo chambers where mediocrity thrives, because the listener bases trapped in those echo chambers just want to hear a very specific thing and don't have super high expectations for the artist that they're following and listening to. So when the artist whose music performs well in those spaces comes out with a new record that is frankly boring and unambitious and terrible, there is little or no downside to them releasing music that frankly is bad or broadly unlikable, because all that matters in terms of gaining commercial success is that you're feeding that confined niche of listeners. Case in point, the new Gunna album. And yeah, while it is true I've never really cared for this man's music too much,
I'm just going to continue reading.
still, listening through this new LP, there's not really anything here that this album adds to his catalog. Not only in terms of the overall sound of this project just being so similar to recent releases he's put out, but also on top of that, a lot of the instrumentals across the record sound nearly the same as well. And again, in a different time period, in a different paradigm, I feel like this is a record that would have been getting torn apart. And yet, from what I understand, this new Gunna LP still did like 80,000 first week. And look, this issue that I'm talking about is not strictly a Gunna thing or strictly even a hip-hop thing. Also take, for example, the new Maroon 5 album, which is such a dismally basic and plain project that it's actually kind of shocking, especially when you consider that there was a point in time where Maroon 5 was legitimately writing some of the biggest pop rock hits of the mainstream ever, and they were songs that were actually pretty good for the time period in which they came out and have aged relatively well. This love is taking its hold on me, she said goodbye too many times. Despite that legacy, despite the presumed talent that was there in the first place to make those songs, Maroon 5 just came out with this new record that is barely an album. It's not even 30 minutes in length. It's loaded with forgettable songs, stale features, production that sounds like we've just booted up the DAW, very soulless and no live band feel at all to speak of. And again, it's another project that doesn't really add anything to the band's catalog. This record in the greater Maroon 5 canon, if you want to call it that, is...
Is it going to be private? But like, hold on. If you can target somebody else, why don't you? Like, why don't you just prove it?
is utterly meaningless and doesn't really do anything in terms of like contributing to the story of their sound or even their biggest songs. And then finally, I think the most shocking instance of all of this right now at this very moment is the one and only Alex Warren, a new breakout singer and songwriter who we talked about recently on the channel due to his #1 hit, Ordinary, just going so hard commercially. In fact, it's still the #1 song in the country now. This guy just dropped his brand new album, and there is just so little discussion about it. I mean, sure, people who are general music fans that I've been aware of, who do music reviews, have not had very positive things to say, but the discourse generally around this album, from what I've seen, is pretty small. Like, little to no passionate music fans that I follow or am aware of seem to be going crazy for it. But also on top of that, there doesn't really seem to be that much interest in pulling it apart either. And again, to me, that's surprising when you actually look at the pretty immense commercial success that Alex Warren has been seeing behind Ordinary and even the first week sales of this album. Like, this is a project that, commercially speaking, people should be chomping at the bit to dive into. Even I myself am completely bored to tears at the thought of having to review this thing, which again is funny because the music on this record is like so the hallmark for so many different sounds that people tend to get like really riled up over on the internet, whether it's songs that have like, you know, lots of Christian themes peppered throughout the lyrics, or if it's the type of music that has like those big, dramatic, over-the-top Imagine Dragons style choruses and drum beats, or even, you know, just like the whole stomp, clap, holler, singer-songwriter vibe that so many on the internet were giving much smaller figures like Brendan Abernathy such a hard time over on TikTok for months. Like, that sound is very
Why didn't this work? Oh, I didn't do it, that's why. Doesn't matter anymore. See, that was the problem I had with my YouTube. Is I was editing out the I fixed that problem, and I was also streaming too much. I wasn't getting anything done. That's problem number 2. Now, how do we solve both of those problems? Do you see any stone around? I guess that's kind of stony over there. We got 15 minutes, and then maybe I'll stream tonight. Or I just do something else, you know? What is this? Oh. fuck did you find my Twitter account? I'm gonna follow this person. They like my post. I'm gonna follow them. Can you tell it's a girl? Fucking, I'm always snotty when I blow my nose. Why is it coming up with Sminum? I remember when songs used to get millions of views. Hundreds of millions of views. Smooth like butter. Alright, stream's over.